Okay, conscious of time, I know we've only got 45 minutes for this. I think we've got about 175 now, so we'll make a start, and anybody that joins after can catch up, I'm sure. So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Richard Watkin. I am the DIP delivery manager working within the MHHS programme. It's definitely a pleasure to have you all here today. I think the high number of attendees is reflective of the interest not only in the DIP but in the programme generally. So it's great to see to have so many of you here. Quick overview of the agenda today. So this is the introductory webinar for the DIP. I'll do a brief introduction before handing over to our newly appointed DIP service provider, who will run you through a number of different things as an introduction to themselves, and then in terms of their delivery approach and timeline, saving some time at the end for questions and answers. So if we just move on and maybe talk about the questions and answers. As with all of our webinars for the MHHS programme, for those of you that have attended before, you'll be familiar with the Slido. For those of you that aren't, we will be taking questions on Slido. So on the screen there, sly.do, hashtag MHHS. Throughout the webinar, you can submit questions on here and we'll address those at the end. It's worked really well on previous webinars, so please do encourage you to submit all of your questions. And with regards to questions as well, this is an introductory webinar. It's not necessarily a detailed or technical webinar, so therefore, if you do have requirements maybe for a future webinar with regards to the DIP, please also submit those on Slido. Today's webinar, as with all MHHS webinars, will be or is being recorded, and the recording and the slides will be made available in the clock tomorrow, I believe. So that's some of the housekeeping items to get out of the way. If we move on to the brief intro, so I've kind of covered it on the agenda in terms of what we're going to cover today. So I'll do a quick brief introduction to the DIP before handing over to our DIP service provider, who will then take you through the remainder of the detail before we get into the Q&A. I think we can move on again. Thank you. So what is the DIP? DIP stands for Data Integration Platform, and it pretty much does what it says on the tin with regards to the MHHS programme. It's the integration platform that sits at the core of the MHHS TOM, which we'll have a brief look at in a moment. It's essentially the message processing or the processing hub for all of the industry flows to help increase the efficiency and effectiveness of how we're processing that half-hourly data, so that we can improve the way that the industry is run through the half-hourly programme. So it sits right at the core. So I think if you want to just move the slide on, we have a brief look at the target operating model. We'll see the big purple box in the middle of the TOM there is the data integration platform. You can see all of the different components that feed in through that. So it's an event-driven architecture that allows the processing of all of those industry flows and files. I won't go into too much in terms of technical detail on that, but essentially what the data integration platform is that central core component, part of the MHHS programme, that will help to process all of those industry flows and files with regards to half-hourly consumption and settlement data. So I think as a way of introduction, that's a brief overview of what the DIP is. Again, these slides will be made available, so I'm not going to go through the previous slides in verbatim. I know that our DIP service provider have a number of things to run through. So as by way of introduction, that's the DIP and its core service. We'll now hand over to Mark Corley from Avanade to introduce the team and the project.
Thank you, Richard. Hello, everyone. As Richard says, my name is Mark Corley. I look after Avanade's energy and utilities business, and we are genuinely delighted to have been selected as the DIPSP service provider last month, still last month. And we're, as Paul will tell you in a moment, we're well on track to deliver the solution on time and to plan. So a little bit about who Avanade are. There's some stats there on the slide, but just to add a little bit to that, we were formed 23 years ago, and we've grown as a joint venture between Microsoft and Accenture, and we've grown organically since to over 60,000 people, about 20,000 of whom are women, which I'm very proud of given the industry that we're in, and being the proud father of a couple of girls. So many of you may know who Avanade are, and lots of people won't, despite our size and scale. But I know there's a few of you on the call that we are long-standing partners with and have been delivering to for many of those 23 years. Given our parentage, as you might expect, and our Microsoft focus, we have more Microsoft certificates, so 40,000 plus Microsoft certifications in the business than all of our peers combined, which you may come to expect given our focus and given our parentage. We also have more Microsoft MVPs, most valuable professionals, than any other organisation in the UK and on the planet. And why is this good for you? This is good for you because, as Paul will mention in a moment, the DIP is primarily based upon Microsoft Azure and Microsoft technology, and our expertise and technical depth in this space and accelerators and delivery experience will make sure that the platform performs well, both in terms of meeting the plan to deliver it, but also in the operation and ongoing operation of the service. Can you move to the next slide, please? So having said I'm proud that we're about a third women, this is a remarkably undiverse slide here. So that's me in the top left-hand corner. So you've met me briefly. I'll hand over to Paul Daniels, and the rest of these people on this slide are the people who are really doing the work. So yeah, so I'll hand you over to some of the rest of the team to introduce themselves.
Perfect. Thank you, Mark. Hello, everybody. It's great to meet you all, albeit virtually. As Mark said, I'm Paul Daniels. I am part of Avanade's delivery management talent community. I am going to be the overall Avanade delivery lead for the DIP. So have been very much focused initially on mobilising and bringing together the preparatory work that we've been doing. And getting the team set up and focused on the key design activities that will need to take place. You'll hear a little bit more from me in a minute, but I would like just to get the rest of the team to introduce themselves briefly to you so that you can recognise faces and names and voices. So I'll start by handing over, if I can, to Paul Brown.
Thanks very much, Paul. And as Paul said, it's great to be on here. It's great to be after about 10 months of a procurement to actually be here, having been the winner. So there are a number of people on the call as well in the team here who've actually been part of the solutioning team while we were going through the procurement process. My name is Paul Brown. I'm the lead architect from Avanade. My role is to work with Paul, but it's to provide leadership to the technical teams. And it's really to ensure the integrity of our solution and that we meet the functional and non-functional requirements of the solution that you're all going to be using. So it's great to be working with you, and I look forward to engaging with you going forward. Over to Lou.
Good afternoon. My name is Lou Otway. I am the application lead for this project. So my background is around 25 to 30 years of software development. The most recent 10 years or so is primarily Azure applications. The last 5 years, only Azure applications. And my responsibility will be for the messaging subsystem and also for the portal application that lets market participants interact with the messaging subsystem. And yeah, I'm delighted to be here too, obviously, and I'm looking forward to working with the wider market. And I'll hand over to Ashley.
Yeah, thanks, Lou. Hi, I'm Ashley. I'm the infrastructure lead on this project. I sit in the infrastructure talent community within Avanade, and for the last 5-6 years now, I've primarily been focused on Azure architecture. Some of the responsibilities which I've got here is around the actual platform itself, the resiliency, scalability, the reliability, and the performance. I've been involved in numerous Azure platforms in this industry and others over the last few years, supporting, building out and delivering large scale modern applications and data platforms that are hosted on Azure. And yeah, very excited to be involved with this.
Sorry, I'm next. Hi everyone. I'm Ashul Wala. Ash, to make it easier, my first name is a bit too many vowels in it. So I'll be looking after the testing for the DIP program. I'll be managing all the test activities and ensuring that the design and the build are meeting the functional and non-functional requirements, managing the PIT, the pre-integration testing, quality gates, and making sure they're going to meet the quality gates before we move into the SIT phase. And I'm really looking forward to work on this project and excited as well. And that's it from my side. Hand over to Alan.
Thanks, Ash. My name's Alan Parsons. I'm the security lead on the project. I'm responsible essentially for ensuring the platform is secure from the start and meets various compliance standards. I'm also responsible for ensuring messages sent and received from the DIP platform are secured appropriately, and I'm responsible for ensuring the platform is monitored correctly and any security incidents during the run are responded to appropriately. And that's it from me. Look forward to working on this project.
Fantastic. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it. I think it's back to me to provide you with an overview of the DIP delivery approach and the timeline that we're working to, particularly with a focus on the design, build and test activities that we've got during the 2023 calendar year. If we can go on to the next slide. Thank you. So again, this is sort of a little bit of repetition in terms of the context that Mark has set, but just want to take an opportunity just to set out the technology approach that we have here. If I start at the top and then I'll work my way around clockwise for those who want to read ahead. So as we've said, from a platform perspective, we will be using Microsoft Azure, we'll be using PaaS services for the core messaging and infrastructure as part of the solution, very much central to the offering and the solution that we proposed for the DIP. By virtue of leveraging the Azure platform and the stack, we will provide highly scalable solution. We know from doing other activity within the energy market that demand usage patterns can vary. We know that the solution needs to cater for that, and so we will be, as I say, setting up, designing the solution in such a way that we can cater for growth in message volumes over time. Our design is a dual region, so it's UK South, UK West in this case, obviously intended to give us that level of resilience for something as critical as the DIP within the market that it operates. Again, you may expect, but just to be clear, we will be looking to automate the solution heavily. We'll be using, for those that are more technical, and I certainly am not one of those, we'll be using DevOps pipelines, we'll be using infrastructure as code, and all of our work will be managed, controlled, delivered via Azure DevOps. So that's our tool set of choice for delivering all software development that we deliver on the Azure platform. Alan touched a little bit there on security, obviously a fundamental part of what we need to put in place for the DIP, for Elexon and for all participants. we'll be using, again, Azure-based products, Sentinel, CSPM, the various security testing capabilities that will exist to make sure that we are delivering on those requirements. And then probably the piece that is most relevant, but we want to call out specifically, is the onboarding process for participants. So PKI certificate management, we will be working with Global Sign on PKI provision, and we will be, I know, needing to communicate in due course on the processes that will be required for onboarding to the DIP as we move forward. So hopefully that just gives you a very high level, and I appreciate many of you will be, as I say, more technical, but a very high level view of the technology approach that we're going to adopt for the DIP. Should we move on to the next slide? So Mark mentioned that we're sort of a month on, end of our sort of first month since we were awarded the DIP. Just wanted to give you a quick summary of the work that we've been doing. In fact, we've had a team working in the background doing preparatory work for most of December and January. We wanted to make sure if we were successful and selected to deliver the DIP, that we would be able to meet the timelines that have been set out by the programme. So what does that mean? Well, we have a fully mobilised and resourced team. You've got an opportunity to meet a number of the work stream leads today. We've actually got 7 work streams. There are 5 of those on this call. We have a service work stream, which we're mobilising this week, and Laura Poston will be joining us as our service delivery manager. And then we have a hypercare work stream, which we will mobilise a little bit closer to SIT and the time that we move into sort of the more structured industry testing. So that's been the sort of mobilisation piece. In terms of the design phase and the work that the team are actively doing at the moment, that's very much been focused on infrastructure. So Ashley and the team have been looking at the tenant structure, getting governance in place, and are setting out all of the environment specifications for the different environments that will be required for the DIP. Lou and his team, they've been working on the application design, executing a series of proof of concepts around message flow and validation. I think it's looking to address the known unknowns or the unknown knowns, depending on which way it's done. But that's obviously a key area for us to get confidence in our early design thinking. Alan, again, quite rightly focused on the Global Sign setup and on ISO certification for the solution. And then Atch has also, as he mentioned, been focused on setting up the testing work stream and looking at dev and pit in terms of the DIP initially. Have to say we've made fantastic progress so far on the design and the work around the Azure landing zone and around the preparatory work for the dev and pit environments. That's progressing very well, and we are on track for the initial milestones, which we'll talk about in a little minute. I think the key message for us at this point is, and we'll look at it on the plan, is that we are bang on track for M9 for the programme at the end of October. Should we step onto the plan just briefly? So again, I think Richard mentioned the slides will be distributed afterwards. This is a simplistic representation of what we're doing. It's so the first sort of phase of work was about mobilisation. Effectively, that culminates with the webinar today. We will have been through all of the initial activity. Design across the various work streams, progressing, as we say, to plan. We've kicked off some of the initial build work. We move again this week, I think, Ash, into the pit environment build and the environment build work itself. Our key objective here is that all of the core design work is done by the end of March, beginning of April. That enables us to move forward with the full build activity, which takes us through to the end of July. We will then be ready. We have a key milestone in terms of readiness for pit at the beginning of August, and then we will be executing our pit testing during September and sort of aiming to complete that at the beginning of October. As you can see, service introduction starts around 3 months, a little over that, before SIT starts at the beginning of November, end of October. And we will communicate, of course, through the programme later about the support arrangements that we'll have in place as a DIP team for SIT testing as we move forward into next year. As I say, key thing here is a really positive start from a DIP team perspective, and on track for the key milestones we have this year. I think that's the overview that I wanted to provide. I think there was one final piece just to mention before I hand back, which is, again, just to reiterate that delivery approach. So automation for the infrastructure development using infrastructure as code, ADO being our tool set of choice for automation and deployment, and Azure AD for participant access. In terms of what to look out for, I think I touched on it just a little bit earlier, but more information to follow on certificate management and the processes that will relate to onboarding and connection to the DIP. With that, I think I'll hand back to Kevin for the Q&A.
You will indeed. Thank you very much, Paul. So yes, folks, we've plenty of questions coming in there, and we'll proceed with them now in chronological order. The first question that came in asks, to what extent is Avanade publicly updating its readiness to market-wide half-hourly settlement participants? And is there any insight into the assurance process that Avanade are subject to? Paul, you're on mute.
Apologies. I mean, so from an Avanade perspective, our reporting route is via Richard as the overall DIP delivery lead. So we will be reporting status in line with the programme governance through Richard. And then in terms of assurance, we will be subject, and again, I'll perhaps defer to Richard here, but we will be subject to design and planning and technical assurance in line with programme arrangements.
Yeah, so that's right, Paul. In terms of the assurance activities, obviously the programme has delivery assurance, test assurance, and various other models that we're following for all elements of the programme, and that won't be any different for the DIP. So the same level of governance that's been applied across the programme.
Super stuff. Thank you both. The next question is a bit more technical. I ask, what will the file structure of the messages that the DIP processes be? For example, JSON, text, or user?
Should we could ask maybe
to me to answer that,
Rob? Yeah, if you could, Rob.
Yeah. Hi everyone. Yeah, so that's an easy question. That's JSON.
Super, Rob. We love a short and sweet answer. Thanks very much.
Absolutely.
The next question asks, to what extent is Avanade publicly updating its readiness to other programme participants? Oh, sorry, I think we've actually answered that one. Regards to the assurance process. We'll move on to the next one, which asks, how will Avanade be positioned with respect to the systems integrator for interfacing with participants such as suppliers and networks, etc.?
So is that question focused more on how will the interaction with the participants be throughout the programme?
I think as it deals with the system integrator, it might be a kind of alignment with the program or how it's kind of set up to kind of carry the messages across the future target operating model.
So
I think, sorry, Paul, go on.
I was just going to say, so I think in terms of a system integrator role, so our role is to deliver a DIP solution with the ability for participants to connect to that in line with the code of connection. So effectively, from an integration standpoint, it will be to ensure that via the program team that we provide the necessary information on how to integrate with the DIP. If the question was more about wider integration, then perhaps that's one that we maybe pick up offline. As Mark alluded to, we know that we work with a number of participants, directly in terms of the energy market. But for this, the team here will be very focused on delivering the DIP and the ability for participants to integrate with that.
Excellent, thank you, Paul. Is Avanade developing the DIP from bottom up, or are there existing solutions or components being deployed to base the DIP on?
As we said, we do more Azure and Microsoft work than most any other organization. So as such, we have a bunch of accelerators in terms of best practices and enable us to get ahead of the plan and build things. So it's not from the ground up at all. It's from a set of components that we've already built and accelerators that we've already built.
Super, thank you very much. The next question is around costs. It asks, can you advise what the ongoing costs are to us as a service for sending and receiving the interface and publishing messages, and how is that cost structured?
I can answer that one. So that is something that we're working on at the moment. The program we're working with Alexa on a costing model for messages going through the DIP.
Thank you very much. That's excellent. Has Avanade commenced the definition of the public key infrastructure solution and engaged with any certification authorities at this time to define security requirements? I think I saw on the plan there, Paul, this part might be one for you, but that's Global Sign, correct?
Yeah, correct. We will be working with Global Sign for the PKI certificate management solution here. Those discussions have started. There are a series of sessions that are planned over the first half of March to get the additional detail that is required as an input for the design. So that is very much work in progress.
Thank you, Paul. Can Avanade share the non-functional requirements for market participants, please, including detail on message volumes and size, and change from the D-flow equivalents would be appreciated.
So I can answer that one again. So those requirements are available on the collaboration site. So I would have thought most people on the call would have access to that. And if you haven't, please just contact your PPC rep.
Yeah, and when we publish the Q&A document following this, we can include a link to where they're stored on the collaboration base also.
Yeah.
Super. Do Avanade expect to need to make changes to the baseline interface specifications, as this could result in rework for participants?
Do you want to answer that one as well? So yes, we are, because Avanade have just come on board properly in about the last 4 to 6 weeks, there will be changes to the interface specs.
Just to follow up on that, any changes to interface specs or anything related to interfaces will be processed in alignment with the governance within the program, will be processed through the relative forum that it needs to go through for review and approval, and will go out to the industry for through those relevant bodies to see those before they go for approval. So it will still follow, things won't be made on the fly. The correct governance processes will be followed, and obviously that will include industry forums and to get the right levels of engagement that we need.
Super. Is there full alignment between the DIP simulator and the emerging DIP design?
So I can answer that one again. So yes, there will be, because obviously they're running off the same interface definitions, and the simulator is trying to build as much of the configuration and the testing that the DIP will also do. So yes, it's a cut down version, obviously.
Super, thank you very much. Have Avanade got any relevant client case studies that reference similar architecture to the DIP?
let's pick that one up as a follow-on action, if that's okay, Kev. I think that there are a number of client case studies that might be suitable. I think it would be helpful to know the context for the ask and us to make sure that what we would provide would be directly relevant.
No problem, Paul. Thank you very much. How do participants integrating with the DIP get technical support from a DIP perspective throughout the build?
So again, Richard, perhaps maybe just clarify, but from our perspective, the DIP team will obviously have the technical expertise if there are specific points that would need to be addressed. I think, and I believe it may be on the final slide in this pack, there is a route for the raising of questions through the PPC mailbox. And then there'll be effectively a triage assessment of those, and where a technical interaction is needed, then the Avanade resources will obviously be made available, be able to address any technical queries that come in.
Yeah, supported by the relevant deliverables and artifacts that will be created throughout the process of the project, such as things like the Code of Connections documentation that will help participants understand what those technical requirements are for the connectivity into the DIP. So the relevant documentation will be published on the collaboration base or on the website for participants to access as well.
Thank you both. When will we see how to sign up to get access to test environments?
Do you want me to pick that one up, Paul?
Yeah, I think so, if that's okay, Richard.
Yeah, so as we go through the process, and obviously we work our way towards the different testing phases, the relevant communications will come out via the programme, and obviously the PPC team being the main interaction with the participants at the moment will probably via that method.
Yeah, I think that's correct. And we'll touch on that in the final slide as well. What is the milestone date for participants to receive examples of each of the physical messages to be handled?
I think that's one we might need to take away.
Pick up offline.
On if we can, yeah. Have we got these sources
no
of the questions, Kev, so we can come back to people?
That one came in anonymously, but obviously the whole Q&A will be published on the public website and on the collaboration base as well.
Perfect.
Is the information available that can describe how we will connect to the test environments? Will be it through public internet or secured connection or other?
So I can answer that one. So we're going to be publishing the Code of Connections document, hopefully within the next couple of weeks, and that will tell participants how to connect to the DIP, both for production DIP and non-production environments.
Nice one, Rob. Thank you. How are Avanade expecting to support DIP connected parties to ensure timely pre-integration test and qualification testing is achieved?
So from an Avanade standpoint, obviously our commitment is to deliver a DIP that meets the functional, non-functional requirements within the timeline set out by the programme, and to make available the information that's needed on how to onboard or participate in testing through the programme alongside the lead delivery partner. Richard, I think in terms then of anything that would be a query about how to connect, that would align back to the question you mentioned before. It would be a combination of the artifacts like the Code of Connection and supporting materials, and then along with access for support through the channels that will be communicated as we prepare for the testing.
Thank you, Paul. The question here asks, when can we expect a high-level design of the Azure solution?
So I think there's an interesting question in there, and I think the first piece for me is the key bit from a participant perspective, we assume, would be how you connect to the DIP, as opposed necessarily to the detailed design within the integration platform itself. So we will be very focused on providing the information that's relevant around the connectivity as the priority from an Avanade perspective in line with the programme ask.
Excellent, thank you, Paul. Are you planning a big bang launch approach, or will the DIP be phased? So are you phased will impact the migration scheduling?
Richard, does one of the team want to take that one, given it's sort of a migration related topic?
Yeah, I'm not sure if there's anybody from the migration team on the LDP on the call to take that one, but we can take that away and come back.
Yeah, I think the first part is it is big bang in the sense that we are committed to delivering the DIP by the end of October to meet the M9 program milestone.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that question was related more towards the actual migration then, though, but we'll take that one away and come back on it.
Super, thank you. What self-serve capabilities will be offered to market participants?
I think we'd need to understand what the ask is around self-serve on that one. So there will be an onboarding and sign-up process obviously established. I think Rob alluded to it previously. That's in process at the moment as to what that will look like. Of course, to be able to sign up to the DIP needs to be able to something that the participants can do actively themselves, so it's self-serve in that sense. But it would be good to understand maybe a little bit more context around the ask on that question.
Yeah, if you want to follow up with a little bit more context on that into the Slido, we can take it away into the Q&A going forward as well. This question asks that the DIP is a messaging integration platform. Would a centralized SDS solution close to the source of the consumption data from the DCC remove complexity and cost?
Have we got somebody from the design team that can take that one?
It's Rob here. I don't really understand what the question is getting at, to tell you the truth. Would a centralised, yes, I don't understand the question, sorry.
Again, if you'd like to follow up with just maybe a little bit of a clarifying statement on that one, we can address in the Q&A just in case we run out of time today. So when we publish that. The next question asks that reference was made to flows and messages. Will DIPS only process events/messages flagged as interfaces in the design artifacts, or INF underscore interfaces in the design artifacts?
So I think I understand that question. The answer is yes.
Super, Rob. Thank you. What will be the security mechanisms for the DIP? Webhooks or JSON-side interface events?
Oh, so the security, yeah. So the security documents are available on the end-to-end security, and they'll also be in the code of connections. Will be we'll be putting in how participants are meant to secure their connections as well.
Thank you, Rob. We've a follow-up question here on the cost piece here. So we did answer that we are working on the cost for sending the interface and publishing messages. Will we be able to advise when these will be available, as participants need to complete their commercials?
We'll look to get a response in line with our Elexon colleagues as soon as we can. If we can get that in response to the Q&A that goes out tomorrow, then we'll try and do that.
Excellent, thank you, Richard. Will a change request be raised for the changes to the interface specs? I think this touched on what you mentioned earlier, Richard, in terms of any changes will adhere to the governance arrangements that are already in place. Is that correct?
That's right, yes.
So I can answer yes. So I've had to raise change requests for the changes to the interfaces that are needed.
Excellent. And all details of our kind of design change control and further change control processes.
Yeah, so they'll go.
And we'll link that as well.
Yeah, they will go through the Paul's design forum.
Will there be a minimum set of connectivity requirements from participants to connect to DIP and Azure, i.e. bandwidth requirement, VPN, etc.?
So I just pointed in at the code of connections document again, which will be forthcoming. There will be the potential to put rate limiting in as well for interfaces, obviously to avoid chatter. But say it's all be forthcoming in the code of connections document.
Super. The next question here asks, what are your views on the non-functional requirements, and when will the platform volume and latency capabilities be published? Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe these are published in the NF4s on the collaboration base. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we did do some work last year, and we did do some estimates on volumes. I think we probably need to relook at them again, but whether we've got capacity to do that or not is another question. It's something we're always looking at, and I think once we start using the set environment, we should get a better idea for what the actual volumes are. We should be able to extrapolate out.
Nice one, Rob. Thank you. The question here asking, we've said that the DIP simulator and the DIP build are aligned. However, if the interface specifications are changing, as was mentioned before, then is this necessarily true?
Yeah, so if there are changes to the interface, obviously the DIP simulator and the DIP build will both change in line with the new requirements. At the moment, both the DIP simulator and the DIP service provider are working from the same set of requirements.
Excellent, thank you. Just a question here about when will the code of connection be published? Crucial design artifact for all participants. Rob, I think we said in the coming weeks. Do we have anything more specific on that, or is there anything you can issue on that?
Yeah, so I think if I just pick that one up, so a code of connections was developed last year. It's about 80% complete. That was taken to the SDWG in around August, September, and was reviewed. About the remaining 20% are design dependent elements from the DIP design. So as Paul previously stated, we're going through that design process at the moment. As those remaining 20% of the requirements for the code of connections drops out of the design, that will then feed into the code of connections, and then we will publish them. So we're anticipating we'll have all of the dependent activities understood by the end of this week. Then that will give us a clear timeline, and then we'll publish those timelines out so people are aware when the code of connections will be available. So hopefully that gives a little bit more context. So the bulk of the work is there, but there are some specifics around the DIP design that we're waiting for and we're dependent on before we can complete that activity. As soon as it's ready, that will be published out.
Excellent, thank you. I have, yes, thank you, Marina. I have Marina messaging me there saying that we have kind of run out of time for the Q&A. There are a number of outstanding questions. We will take those away and get answers, and they will be provided once we publish the Q&A document as well. I'm just going to touch on very briefly here about, so there's a number of topics we did touch on in the Q&A there in terms of access and support and having a say over what the future of this looks like. So of course, the working groups is a key way in which you can engage with the program, especially engage what the DIP will look like. The level 4 working groups, including the SIF testing working group and the qualification end-to-end sandbox working group, are key working groups when it comes to this, and these are open to all participants. If you would like to attend, please email the PMO at mhhsprogram.co.uk. Also through the collaboration base, you can access the headline report, minutes, and any papers published as well. As Richard touched on also, in terms of the DIP support, we do welcome any queries regarding the DIP, and the program is here to support all participants as you move through your design, build and test and into SIT or qualification. The PPC team will triage any queries. So if you do have a query in relation to the DIP, please either send it to your PPC representative or you can email the PPC team mailbox at ppc@mhhsprogram.co.uk. And finally, another plug for the PPC team. If you do not engage with the PPC team, would like to put in place a monthly bilateral or just reach out to have a conversation about the DIP or any element of the program, please reach out to the PPC mailbox as well. If you would like a more in-depth session with one of our design or our testing teams, please reach out to your PPC representative for further information. Richard, I'll pass back over to you to close us out.
Perfect. Appreciate with 2 minutes over. So I guess it's just thank yous really. Thank you to everybody for joining. I think we had over 200 participants in the end, so that's great. Great levels of engagement and interest in the DIP, which is really good, positive. So thank you all for joining. Thank you to Avanade for introducing yourselves, and hopefully we've gone part of the way to answer some of those questions. We'll look to process the rest of them and get them published out in the clock tomorrow. So again, this recording and the slides will be made available on the clock tomorrow. Thanks to everybody for joining, and any suggestions you may have for future DIP webinars, you can submit them for the next couple of minutes on the Slido as well. So, you know, if there is any further specific information or topics for webinars in the future, please submit them in the coming minutes. But thanks once again, and yeah, we'll see you all soon. Thank you very much.